Greetings, everyone. This is another round of PAD 326 Development Theories and Administration. Okay, yes. In today's lecture, our emphasis would be on the conduct of affairs within the confines of the civil service. Those ingredients, those factors that stimulates productivity within the civil service. Like we have seen before now, and as encapsulated in the theories that we have looked at, particularly with the human relations theory, we saw clearly how the human being or the employer and the employees have become the hallmark of any idea of administration or organizational setup. Remember, we said that owing to the complexity of modern day society, there has been from the traditional and legalistic study of public, and that due to how human beings as machines within the system and the emphasis was on productivity alone, modern day society and the transformation and the fact that human society has become more complex than it used to be, there has been that departure from that earliest practice of administration to the one where the human being have taken center stage in the study of administration. And we have followed that procedurally to have looked at the internal working systems of various administrative components and the various ways in which organizations operate. We have looked at how they try to relate with their external environment as well, and to create that balance to ensure a stability of the system, because the internal arrangement is also a reflection of the external posture that organizations hold. And if you have a balanced arrangement between the internal working system side by side, the internal working arrangement reflecting the views of the public, you have a stable system that guarantees more results and in the pursuit of development. Like we saw in the last class where we discussed administrative law and the issues of delegated legislation. And even before then, we were able to establish the fact that when the human being is carried along and have the feeling of involvement, adequate participation within how activities are carried on within the civil service structure or within an organizational arrangement, there is the tendency that such an individual will be more committed and be more productive in such an arrangement. I was also in line with that theory of the human relations arrangement that focuses on the individual as the centerpiece of every discussion of organization and administration. We saw clearly that the welfare of the individual was put into adequate consideration, and every system that guarantees a satisfactory level of welfare for the employees within such an arrangement, there is a tendency for higher productivity and higher results within such an arrangement. So having said that, our today's lecture would focus on moral conduct and discipline within the civil service. So let me first of all remind you that the civil service is an agent of development because they are the ones that see to the implementation of government policies and programs. And remember, the whole idea of this course is to see to the best practice that guarantees a functional system that can provide the greatest happiness for the greatest numbers of persons within a society. So the civil service is an agent of change, is an agent of societal transformation and development. Hence, its principles and practices, its objectives, the rules and regulations guiding it must have the interest of the workers at heart. And that is why the issue of the welfare of the civil service is very paramount when one talks about a functional system. And how does that come? The welfare can be measured in various ways. When there's adequate involvement of the civil servant, okay, Saka Abdulwahid, okay, I sent the code to join the lecture to the course rep, but I'm surprised that I think it's only you I have online at the moment. I'm hoping that other students would equally join up later or do well to watch the video at the end of it all. So there are various ways in which the idea of moral and discipline and the conduct in general of the employees can be improved upon. And when you have a system that guarantees an effective protection of the interest of the worker, you tend to have a higher productivity and higher performance rate from such employees. So the issue of morale must be taken seriously in every arrangement that works in the sustainability of the system and a result-oriented arrangement. So for the purpose of this course, we said that for public administration to be successful, it must give up the dead mechanistic theory of organization and should adopt a dynamic, creative theory of public management based on human motivation. Like I said earlier on, and judging from the first theory that we looked at, which is the scientific management theory of Frederick Taylor, that treated the worker as a machine or a tool within the system that should be directed towards productivity alone, that we saw also within that theory that the individual did not have the free will to operate, and that was not productive enough. And that society has evolved beyond that stage. That is what the statement is trying to say, that we have now transformed or moved upwards to the period where the human being is now the subject of discussion within any theory or any operational system that guarantees productivity. Because when the interest of the individual is put into consideration, there is the tendency for an issue of morale, issue of even remuneration must be within the system. The civil service should become a team of fellow moral and code of ethics. The secret of the high morale built up by the civil servants themselves, wholesome morale and teamwork, all of which are so essential for the smooth coordination of many individuals. What this image is trying to say is that, like we have seen before now, the civil service in Nigeria is modeled along the lines of the British civil service. It is an inherited arrangement from the British civil service. And when you look at what is obtainable within the confines of the British civil service, we see a standard that tends to reflect higher motivational arrangement for the employees. And that is the reason why it is an effective system. Even though there's much with what is obtainable in Nigeria, you would see that we are far from having the requisite ideas of motivation and morale that should exist within our civil service to guide it towards productivity. So what the statement is simply trying to say is that our system, since it is borrowed from the British civil service arrangement, that we should also emulate the standards and the practices that guarantees loyalty, cooperation, teamwork, and better productivity within the service and across boards. So for there to be any meaningful progress, it therefore means that the idea of morale must be taken seriously. As demonstrated in the previous lecture, it is worthy of note that the secret of the successes of some models of the civil service around the globe are a demonstration of the right moral and reward system, which the British civil service is a model worthy of emulation. And it is common knowledge that the secret of the British service is its high morale built up by the civil servants themselves. Wholesome morale stimulates loyalty, cooperation, and teamwork, all of which are so essential for the smooth coordination of organization and helps to position them for the actualization of their objectives. So it is common knowledge that where the system favors an improved arrangement, that the welfare of the civil servant is guaranteed, there is bound to be productivity within such an arrangement. And when the environment is a friendly one for people to apply their knowledge, the requisite training is guaranteed, you would find productivity to be the end result of such an arrangement. And that is why the British civil service continues to be a model to other societies, particularly those that are not economically positioned as those of the civil service. So we have a model to emulate, and then the ideas to be replicated in our civil service to improve the welfare of the workers. So what is morale in itself? Morale is an inner possession of an individual or a group. In a simple term, it is the state of mind of an individual with respect to his work or environment. It is an attitude. In its individual form, morale is built upon the opportunities to acquire distinction, prestige, and personal power, the right to be considered successful, respected, and an opportunity for personal self-development. So if you look at the checklists that are embedded in this definition, you would find that it goes to stimulating the individual positively to attain the highest levels of productivity within the system. So any system that guarantees an improved moral system is one that is bound to succeed. Because when the individual feels involved and then given the opportunity to show the distinction that they are made of and the discretionary powers that they can use to transform the system, you would find that such a system is one that will be successful. So morale goes hand in hand with greater opportunities, greater responsibilities for the civil servant or the employee within an organization. In its group form, it sustains an attractive personal association, the easy adaptation to conditions in the organization, to habitual methods and attitudes of employees. A high group morale may help tide over face of depression of an employee who is perplexed and distressed by personal motives. What this statement is trying to say is that where the conditions of service are encouraging and there is high productivity owing to a high level of morale, that the employee will function better and will overcome issues of depression and other personal challenges that may come in conflict with the levels of duties that such an employee is to carry out. Remember, in one of our lectures of bureaucracy, we talked about objectivity, impartiality, and result orientation as part of the hallmark of what a vibrant civil service is expected of. So that's when looked at from the angle of having a stimulated arrangement where the worker feels entitled to certain benefits, a guaranteed welfare system, such an employee would perform better and productivity will be guaranteed within such a system. So the idea of having a high morale within the civil service is also in sync with the ideas of productivity that the civil service should be structured to attain. Like I said earlier on, the civil service is an agent of development and must do everything possible to achieve that within the service. Marx believes that the highest morale has an intellectual quality results from emphasis upon information, understanding, and intercommunication, which rests in turn on genuine participation in institutional thinking, planning, deciding, and evaluating. These are dynamics of morale. So a system that guarantees that the worker is treated or considered as the hallmark of existence within such an arrangement is one where you will see increased participation and adequate planning for the right result to be gotten. So the idea of morale has so much benefits that can be gotten from it when put into perspective in terms of result orientation. So it therefore goes to say that a system that has higher morale for its employees is a system that would yield better results than the one where the staff or the employees feel not adequately carried along or attached to the system. Dimmock and Dimmock explained that morale is a byproduct, a combination of components which produces a balance and a healthy situation in which people may work with self-respect with the opportunity for individual growth. So you can see that beyond the angle of the welfare needs of the employee alone, there is also the angle of self-respect associated to it, and there is the angle of increased opportunity for the individual to succeed in an atmosphere where the morale is high, where there's adequate encouragement, where the employees are carried along and are in sync with the principles and objectives of the organization. So morale is a very important aspect of the civil service that must be projected and must be put into consideration. How to build up morale? You see, when you have a functional system, it is a system that protects both the internal working arrangement side by side this external arrangement as well. That is, the organization and the environment which it operates in must be effectively put into consideration in how activities are carried out. So there are so many ways to boost these levels of in a relationship and interdependency between the organization and its external environment. And here we say that knowledge of the purpose and objective of the organization is a way to stimulate improved morale within the organization. It is important that the employees should have a knowledge of the purpose and objectives which the organization seeks to achieve and should be convinced of their social value so that he may sympathize with the objects themselves or the objectives of the organization. You know, what this statement is trying to say is that when people are carried along, there is adequate information of the principles, objectives, the goals, the missions, and the visions of the organization, and they are actively involved. There is the tendency that such an employer or an employee would perform better in terms of ensuring that the results that would be churned out of the organization is that which would guarantee the actualization of its objectives. So what this statement is trying to say is that workers should be carried along. They should have the knowledge, the purpose, and the objectives for which the organization is established. So when they are actively involved, there is the tendency that they will work towards having better results because they know that when better results come up, their welfare also would be improved upon. So that aspect is very important when one talks on how to improve morale within the service. Also, confidence in his superior officers. You know, we experience a lot of high-handedness in various organizations, and that is a negativity when one considers issue of morale within an organization. But when you have adequate confidence and the support of your superior officers, there's the tendency that you would act better because you know that there will be a reward arrangement at the end of it all. So confidence in integrity and good intentions of the superior is also a yardstick for boosting morale within the service. The higher officers should be fair, impartial, hardworking, and honest, and should not exhibit attitudes that suggest disrespect to subordinates. If the higher officers are corrupt, the fact will be spread throughout the organization, and the morale of the employees would be sapped. So they must exhibit discipline. They must give room for inputs from subordinates. They must show uprightness and disregard corrupt practices. So when all these are put in place and in the right proportion, there is the tendency that such an environment would have greater productivity as everyone would be carried along, both superior and subordinates within the organization. Involvement in the policy making and running of the organization. Take, for instance, a system that gives you greater roles to play, greater opportunities to make your own input to contribute in bettering the conditions of service within the organization and possible ways to attain the objectives of the organization is one that would definitely have the right kinds of employees working in support of the goals of the organization. So when you are carried along and your inputs are respected, you are bound to produce better, to work higher within such an environment. Side by side, or in comparison with that which does not give room for the employer to make inputs in terms of decision making. A sense of participating in the policy making and running of the organization heightens the morale of the employees. They should be allowed to actively participate in the formulation of work programs. This will definitely boost their morale and sense of pride. In fact, the old concept of hierarchy and chain of command must give way for cooperation and partnership. Those in charge should be more of a leader than a boss. You see, this statement is self-explanatory, and it goes to show, even in our day-to-day activities, that when you are appreciated, when you are carried along, when you feel that positions of authority and responsibilities are accorded you in an organization, there is the tendency that you would do everything to ensure that there is success within that organization. So what this statement is trying to say is that the idea of having superiors breathing on the neck of inferiors or subordinates should not happen, or making people feel they are inferior to you should be workplace should be those of cooperation and partnership, and that people should be accorded responsibilities and powers in terms of making suggestions for the actualization of the goals and objectives of the organization. Involved, such an individual will perform better. Stimulating leadership. Stimulating leadership can really morale building in the organization is a continuous process and a responsibility for every manager. The chief executive among employees. So, in as much as there should be strict supervision, there should be rules and regulations to guide the conduct of affairs in an organization. There should also be that leverage that employees should enjoy in terms of having greater opportunities and responsibilities within the organization. So when they are carried along and they are not considered not relevant in the system, there's the tendency that they will perform better. And leadership roles should be accorded employees within an organization. Loyalty and devotion is also another aspect of boosting morale within an organization. Personnel loyalty also builds up morale in service. Successful higher officers inspire devotion amongst their subordinates. No hard and fast rules can be laid down to win his devotion because one officer will win it one way while another in another way. However, the officers should behave in a manner as indicated previously so as to create confidence amongst the employees. So there's no gain saying that a system that guarantees improved working conditions, that gives adequate opportunities for the employees to be part of the decision-making system, and other welfare arrangements that exist within the system is one that will definitely command a high level of loyalty and devotion to duties from the employees. So if you're in a workplace where you know your inputs are respected, where you know that you are part of the organization, you are by natural standard expected to work and be loyal to the system. So the needs are endless, and the relevance of it cannot be overstated, owing to the fact that everybody wants to carry it along, everybody wants to feel important. And when you accord them that respect and that conform to a high level of loyalty and discipline within such cannot be overstated when one talks on the relevance of morale within an organization. Praise or recognition. In an environment, or you find yourself in a group setting where when you do well, you are rewarded adequately, and your superiors recognize your inputs within the system, you are bound to even do more because it stimulates further productivity. And the relevance of that is necessary to have a functional system that is built around result orientation and in the pursuit of development. So morale rests upon recognition. It is human nature to crave for praise or recognition. When a civil servant has done a work of exceptional nature, he must get his due recognition and honor. In private enterprises, the employer accorded recognition, and this would raise his morale. Thus, let it be remembered that morale is a very sensitive thing. So, like I said earlier on, that when you are accorded the right levels of recognition on the premise of your inputs to an organization, there is a tendency that you would even work harder, carry out more research on how to attain the goals and objectives of the system. So when you are rewarded, when you are praised, when you are recognized, you are bound to perform better than an environment that promotes hostility and does not reward hard work or recognize the inputs of the employees. So the civil service within the Nigerian context must put into consideration these various aspects that can stimulate productivity. So when narrowed to the civil service in Nigeria and the aspect of morale, so many considerations are looked into. The general civil service system is made up of career personnel who have tenure and who are administered according to traditional civil service practice. See, there are elements of morale that we'll equally look at as we make further progress. First, when beyond what we have said now, when a system guarantees that people are given a level playing ground to succeed and to rise from the lowest rung of the ladder to the highest position of authority within the system, there is that feeling of attachment that they hold to such a service, and they will do everything to preserve it and protect it and guarantee that its objectives are met. So when you look at what the state is trying to say is that civil servants must have a tenure, a guaranteed tenure, that they can only be relieved of it on account of gross misconduct. So when that tenure is guaranteed and their levels of productivity equally secured and their welfare needs are also protected, there is bound to be results from such a system. And the civil service in Nigeria must be modeled along those lines to ensure that the right things are done in favor of the civil servant. And when the civil servant is comfortable, there's the high tendency of such an employee to produce better and guarantee that the objectives of the organization would be met. Its overriding characteristics are the emphasis that is placed on position, its description of duties, responsibilities, requirements, and qualifications. As a public personnel system, the civil service has been the historic locus of public administration. Hence, there is the need for high morale amongst the civil servants in the discharge of their duties. The civil service system values the notion of neutrality, merit, and being removed from politics. In fact, no activity of public administration can be performed today without civil servants. So with this statement, you can already see the overwhelming influence that the civil servant or the civil service holds in terms of the operationalization of the policies of government. They are the agent of development that the government puts in place or charges to carry out its function. So when the civil service is built around the merit system, built around neutrality, built around objectivity, and guarantees that the right persons are put in the right positions, there is bound to be greater results from such an arrangement. Also, when the civil service is immune or protected from undue political influence, you would find that it would be a system that would function a whole lot better. Well, I'm having a low battery here. I hope that carries me through. Okay, so I would try to run through it to ensure that we round up before my laptop goes off. So the civil service should be an environment where morale of the employees must be encouraged. So there are features of the civil service that are in tandem with a high level of morale in existence. The basic features of civil service worth mentioning are as follows: professionalism. So it goes to show that a system that guarantees the welfare and a high moral standard within the service for the employees would definitely be one built around professionalism. Hierarchy, that is the flow of information or chain of authority that exists within the service. Bureaucracy, in line with hierarchy, also goes to show how superiors relate with their subordinates within the system. Impartiality and anonymity. Impartiality, like we saw in Max Weber's theory of bureaucracy, has it that the system must be built on productivity and result orientation and not allowing the personal feelings and influence of the employee to come in contact or in consonance or in conflict with his duties that ordinarily he should perform within the job place. So these are the attributes that guarantees a functional system built around an improved moral system for the employees. The functions of the civil service, like we have said earlier on, that the civil service is a chain or is an organization that is built around carrying out government policies and programs, and an agent of development has a lot of functions that they play to the government of the day. First, they carry out advisory roles. And these advisory roles are very important in terms of how they guide the executive class or the political class in the actualization of the goals of development. Program and operational planning, they guarantee that they guide the government of the day on how to pursue issues of development and to create a system that rewards all and sundry. Organization and method in terms of monitoring and guaranteeing strict adherence to the rules and regulations to stimulate efficiency and effectiveness within the civil service operates under this class. So the civil servant also carries out the role of ensuring that government policies are strictly adhered to and results gotten at the end of the day. Administrative adjudicatory powers also lies within the civil service as they guide the government of the day or the political class on the best possible way to carry out government functions. Delegated legislative powers, they help the government of the day in carrying out functions that ordinarily cannot be all concentrated in a single position, like we discussed in the last class, and in tandem with the principle of decentralization, that the relevance of giving authority to other bodies to operate, but in tandem with the goals of the organization cannot be overemphasized, because when authorities are delegated to people in other positions and in the grassroots, there is the tendency that people will have this feeling of being involved and an attachment to the system, and that goes a long way to guarantee productivity. So there are also factors that affect morale within the civil service, and a few of them mentioned here are poor condition of service and welfare. A system where the reward system is poor or that does not put into consideration the needs of the civil servant is one which the morale is definitely low and productivity would definitely be low. Undue interference by the political class. Like when we discussed about the spoil system, that we said that some persons abuse their offices or are brought into the civil service and given positions of authority to the disregard of those that have grown through the ranks, that such political interference would not augur well when one talks about issues of productivity and the result that ordinarily should be gotten from the service. So that also is a major challenge. The spoil system as against merit system. Like we said, that the merit system provides a level playing ground for every individual to try. But the spoil system guarantees abuse of office, and people use that arrangement to line their pockets as against providing for the interest of the masses. Corruption and abuse of power. All these are factors that does not augur well when one talks about issues of morale within the civil service. Also, the issue of corruption in the civil service is one that brings down the morale of the employees within the service. And any system that corruption rages in an alarming rate is one that would have low levels of productivity. Corruption is a deliberate and intentional exploitation of one's position, status, or resources directly or indirectly for personal advertisement, whether in terms of material gain or enhancement of power, prestige, or influence, beyond what is legitimate or sanctioned by commonly accepted norms to the detriment of the interest of other persons or the community as a whole. When you look at this statement closely, it goes to show that a system that is corrupt is one where only a few individuals benefit, and that they abuse the system by virtue of how they exploit other individuals, and to a large extent, it does not go well in terms of productivity. Because when the mass of the people feel neglected and that a few individuals only benefit from the system, it's a system that is bound to crash as time goes on. And that is why, like we know it in Nigeria, corruption is one of the challenges that we continue to grapple with and has, to a large extent, retarded development and even the functionality of the civil So sorry, I had issues with my power source. Uh, so happened that I lost my network. So our discussion on corruption, that when the system is a corrupt one, is one where people will not be adequately involved or will have the feeling of attachment, and such a system would not be one that would yield the desired result. Causes of corruption. There are so many causes that have been attributed to why we run a corrupt system. Like, people have looked at it from various angles, particularly the arguments of development scholars, that the internal rubrics of these underdeveloped economies are the result of why they are the way they are, why they are underdeveloped. And corruption is one of them. So we have seen within the confines of this text that there are various attributes that system. And we say first is the historical cause. One would want to explain this from the angle of perhaps colonialism, slavery, and a host of other practices that happened prior to modern day study of the civil service and administration. Economic costs. You know, people are quick to submit to corruption on the premise of not being able to meet their economic needs. So when they find an opportunity to be corrupt, to line their pocket, they quickly go into it. And before you know it, becomes a clog in the wheel of progress within the system. Sociological causes. This has maybe the belief system, how people perceive of corruption in different societies. We have seen cases where even when corrupt officials are to be punished within the government circle, you see people coming out to say, no, leave them, they are not corrupt. Or if they are corrupt, they are our own slot within the system. We know one happening presently where people come out to say, okay, you cannot touch such a person on whatever grounds or whatever excuse they deem fit. So lack of civil consciousness is also another cause of corruption. When people are not adequately knowledgeable of how the system is to be carried out or how they should adhere strictly to rules and regulations, there is a tendency that they will submit to a lot of abuses within the system. Also, there's the political cost, like we saw in the argument of the spoil system, that the spoil system promotes corruption and promotes inefficiency within the system. And when you look at that closely, it is sustained politically because of undue interference by politicians within the civil service. So, of causes of corruption. And when we have a corrupt system, it can be gotten from such a system because the vast majority not carried along or not involved or their interests not adequately protected would not promote the results that ordinarily should be gotten. Corruption reached the climax soon after the attainment of independence. Charges of corruption Nigeria against the governor and other cabinet ministers, not only by the opposition political parties itself. Thus, the acquisitive society must be replaced by a equitable distribution of wealth, justice, and fairness. Widespread corruption should be eliminated at all costs if there would be any meaningful progress in the society. So there is no gain saying that we have cases of corruption across the length and breadth of this country. So many positions, so many governments, be it states or federal, we have had cases of corruptions here and there. And that does not augur well in terms of the productivity that is expected of the civil service. So for there to be any meaningful progress, it therefore means that we must do away with corruption. And how do we do that? We must submit to rules and regulations that guides the system in general. We must ensure that issues of corruption are totally rejected as corruption is a bane of development. In a corrupt atmosphere, there is not much that the civil service can do in the pursuit of development. And like we know before now, that the civil service is also an agent of change, or the public service an agent of change. In any capacity you find yourself, you must pursue uprightness as a way to ensure that the system is stable and balanced enough to yield the benefits that ordinarily should accrue to it. So corruption is a bane to development, and the needed aspects or approach must be taken to guide against corruption. And like we have seen before now, the issue of morale should be taken seriously to guarantee an effective system. In conclusion, civil servants need a boost in morale and a change in their work attitude if in the future the civil service is to be meaningful. The days are now gone when civil servants were a kind of terror to common man. Civil servants are now the humble servants of the people who work for them and help in their welfare. That a change has come about in the lookout of civil servants cannot be denied, but still they have to go a long way to make the common people feel that civil servants exist for their welfare and prosperity, and that they would cooperate with the civil servants in the task of nation building and the pursuit of development. So if you look at it closely, from all we have done so far, you would find that the relevance of the civil service cannot be overemphasized. And there are various principles, various theories, various scholarly perspectives that guides the understanding of the public service in general. And for any meaningful progress to be made, the interest of the worker must take a center stage in any production arrangement, in any organizational arrangement. So the role of the civil servant or employee within an organization is that which guarantees that the end state, that is the result that the organization is set up for, must be achieved. That is the role of the individual guarantees that. So also the interest, the welfare of the individual must be put into consideration. So it's a win-win situation when your employees are treated fairly. So be it from a private angle or from the public service, the interest of the worker should be the hallmark for the establishment of such an organization, because organizations do not exist in isolation. Be it within or its external environment, the relevance of the individual cannot be overstated. So in line with that, we have come to a conclusion of this lecture, and I'll create an opportunity for us to have a revision maybe next week, but definitely before your exam time, so that within that period, you will come up with any question or make any contribution, come up with past questions and all that you need clarifications about so that you prepare better for your examination. So having said that, I'll be giving the floor for anybody to ask questions. I think I have Saka and Sabo online. So if you have contributions to make, if you have questions to ask, we'll discuss that now within the next few minutes of our time. So, everybody,
good morning, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Saka.
My own question is it's based on this corruption issue.
I didn't
Supposedly,
get
they
that.
are asked that I said
Okay.
I want to ask question based on the corruption, which was the last discussion. So my question is, can corruption be eradicated in this country with the situation we have on ground?
Yes, it's very possible. It's very possible owing to the fact that, like we have looked at our topic for today, where you have a high morale operating within the system, that employees feel attached to the system and they are adequately rewarded, they would not submit to corrupt practices and they will be quick to report corrupt practices as well. So it's an issue that must be tackled holistically. And the core of it should be that the individual be given their due within the system. So when that is guaranteed, of course, corruption can be done away with. Even if not entirely, it can be reduced considerably where everybody will benefit from it. See, there is enough to go around. That's the funny part of it all. But because of the greed that people exhibit in form of corruption, we now have the mass of the people suffering and struggling to make ends meet. But ordinarily, with a system that guarantees adequate distribution of the material needs of the people, is not one that is likely to submit to corruption. So when the needs of people are met, when you don't have to think of where your next meal will come from, there's the likelihood that you would not submit to corrupt practices. And you will not allow other individuals around you to exhibit such corrupt practices. So corruption can actually be tackled.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. So any other question or any other contribution before we call it a day? Okay, I am on the WhatsApp platform, and you can bring up your questions there and make your contributions so that every other person will be carried along as well. So thank you, and have a wonderful day. Okay, I think because I was logged out due to the challenges with my power source, maybe one of you have to end the lecture from your side. I think Sakai should help us do that. Help me end the lecture.
All right, sir.